I'm Layla Ramirez, 36, and I built my own healthcare group from the ground up after years of working behind the scenes to support someone else's dream. For nearly a decade, I stood by my husband through med school, residency, and every financial storm his family wouldn't help him weather. But when he collapsed and landed in the ICU, and they threw me out, saying I wasn't family, I made a decision that changed everything. Have you ever felt erased by the very people you gave everything to? If you have, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. You're not alone. Before I dive into what happened, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to reclaim your voice after being pushed aside, tap the like button and subscribe for more real stories about quiet strength and setting boundaries. Because what came next wasn't what they expected. I met Daniel in a chemistry lab during our sophomore year. He was late to the first class, flustered, missing his safety goggles, and asked to borrow mine. I said no. Then I noticed the ink smudge on his collar and how carefully he was trying not to let anyone see that his notebook was actually half a stack of recycled printer paper clipped together. By week 3, we were studying together almost every night. Back then, we were both broke and too stubborn to admit it. I worked weekends at a bookstore and evenings at the student help desk. Daniel was delivering food at night and doing early shifts at a physical therapy center. We used to joke that the only time we'd ever be rich was when we could afford laundry service and a full night's sleep. He was smart, the kind of smart that made professors pause mid-lecture to ask his opinion. But he was always tired, always worried. I found out later that his family didn't help with tuition, not because they couldn't, but because they didn't think he needed it. It builds character, his mother once told me. We didn't raise our son to expect handouts. She said that in front of me the first time I met her. We were 22. She offered me a glass of water, not even lunch, and told me point blank, Daniel needs to stay focused. Relationships complicate things. I said nothing. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table, like that would make it better. We moved in together the summer before med school. A studio with a leak in the ceiling and no air conditioning. I was working full-time by then. Office admin during the day, waiting tables on weekends. I paid most of the rent for those first 3 years. I didn't mind. He was trying so hard to get through school without crashing. I kept telling myself it would be worth it. And it was, in some ways. Daniel did well. He matched with a residency in emergency medicine. Long hours, high pressure, but he loved it. He'd come home with stories about patients who came in near death and walked out 3 days later. He always gave credit to the team, but you could tell he was proud. By then, I'd started doing contract work in medical systems, consulting, nothing glamorous, just helping small practices streamline their operations. It paid well enough that we finally had a little breathing room. I even helped his dad cover a shortfall on their mortgage one winter. They didn't ask, but Daniel told me they were behind, and I wired the money. His mom never said thank you. Not once. The strange thing is, I wasn't expecting gratitude. I just assumed, back then, that families weren't perfect, and that maybe, eventually, she'd soften. She didn't. When we got married, she wore white. I tried not to let it bother me. She gave a toast at the reception and said, Daniel has always made good choices, but we all know how important it is to learn from our mistakes, too. People laughed awkwardly. Daniel's hand found mine under the table again, same as always. I didn't pull away, but something inside me tightened. The years passed. We moved into a nicer place. Daniel's hours got better. My contracts started getting longer, more stable. I'd supported him for so long that I didn't really notice when the balance started to shift. He made more than me now, but I was still the one managing the bills, the home, remembering birthdays, checking in with his parents. We tried for a baby. Twice. It didn't happen. His mother told me, during Christmas dinner one year, that sometimes nature tells us what's meant to be. I was halfway through chewing my food. I swallowed and changed the subject. Daniel didn't say anything. He never really stood up to her. I don't think he knew how. Still, I believed we were a team. Even if we didn't talk about everything. Even if I swallowed a lot of small slights and carried most of the emotional weight. I believed we were building something together. I believed I mattered. Looking back now, I see the imbalance clearly. I gave, freely, often, without being asked. I made excuses for them when they ignored me in group chats, when they scheduled family dinners and forgot to invite me, when they sent Daniel holiday gifts labeled only with his name. He always said, "That's just how they are." And I always replied, "I know." But I didn't. Not really. Not until the night everything changed. Not until I learned what it truly meant to be considered not family. That moment didn't come out of nowhere. It was years in the making. Years of being tolerated but never embraced. Of being useful but never trusted. Of being present but invisible. I thought Daniel and I were stronger than their judgment. I thought love was enough. I was wrong. After Daniel finished his residency, things were supposed to get easier. That's what everyone says. The hours get more predictable. The stress levels come down. The financial strain eases up a bit. And it did, for a while. We started going out more, sleeping regular hours. We even started talking about travel. Italy had always been on our list. But around the same time, his mother started calling more often. At first, it was under the guise of checking in. How's the job? How are you sleeping? Do you like your new supervisor? Then it shifted to comments about our apartment. It's small, don't you think? You know, if you were living closer to us, we could help you get into a real neighborhood. Things like that. Then she started visiting. Unannounced. I'd come home from a client meeting and find her in my kitchen, rearranging my spice rack. She'd open the fridge and say, "Oh, you don't cook from scratch?" Once, I caught her going through our mail. She held up a utilities bill and said, "Still paying this much? You really should let Daniel handle this stuff." I mentioned it to him later that night. He laughed. "She's just trying to be helpful." It was easier not to argue, so I didn't. We hosted Thanksgiving that year. Small group. Just a few close friends, and of course his parents. I spent 2 days cooking. Got up early. Cleaned everything. Made the kind of meal people post about. Daniel's mother walked in, looked around, and said, "Wow, this is ambitious. Are you sure it's not too much for you?" Dinner went smoothly. Or at least I thought it did. Until dessert. She was on her second glass of wine, and she said it casually. So casually you could almost miss it. If Daniel didn't have to carry so much weight at home, he'd probably already be a department lead. I looked up. She didn't look at me when she said it. She just kept cutting her slice of pie. Daniel cleared his throat. "Mom, can we not?" That was it. No defense. No correction. Just that. I stared at him. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I stood up, quietly took my plate to the kitchen. No one followed me. After everyone left, he told me not to take it personally. "She's old-fashioned," he said. "She just thinks people should have clear roles." I said, "Do you agree with her?" He didn't answer. After that, she stopped using my name when she introduced me to people. At a wedding we attended together, she told someone I was just Daniel's wife, then laughed and added, "But she means well." I heard it. So did Daniel. He didn't correct her. Things that used to feel like minor annoyances started to build. She'd comment on what I wore. "Oh, that's very comfortable." She'd bring up other women Daniel had dated, usually ones with more traditional careers. "You remember Emily, don't you? She's a pediatrician now. Married someone on the board." I tried to let it slide. I told myself she didn't mean anything by it. But deep down, I knew. There was this one time, Daniel was out of town for a conference, and I offered to drop off something his mom had left at our place. It was just a coat she'd forgotten. She invited me in. I stayed for maybe 15 minutes. As I was leaving, she asked if Daniel had ever considered seeing a therapist. I said I wasn't sure. Why? She said, "Well, I just wonder sometimes if he's tired. Like he's carrying too much. He's always had this tendency to pick projects." I stood there, coat in hand, trying to figure out if I'd just been called a project. When I told Daniel about it, he laughed. "She doesn't think that. You're reading into it." But I wasn't. I could feel the shift. She started inviting him to things without including me. Birthdays, family dinners, church functions. When I asked why I wasn't invited, she said, "Oh, I assumed you'd be working." She always assumed that. And she was right. I did work a lot, but not because I didn't want to be around. I worked because I'd built a career from nothing, because I'd supported both of us for years, because I didn't want to depend on anyone. Still, the message was clear. I was outside the circle. Daniel stopped noticing, or maybe he chose not to notice. He stopped asking if I wanted to come to his parents' house. He stopped suggesting we do things as a couple. He still loved me. I don't doubt that. But he started acting like peace was more important than honesty, like keeping things simple mattered more than keeping things fair. And his mother knew it. She could see he wouldn't push back. So she pushed harder. The comments turned sharper, more direct. One Sunday brunch, she looked at my hands and said, "You really should start moisturizing more. You're not 25 anymore." Daniel said nothing, just kept eating. There's a kind of silence that feels like agreement, like abandonment. I started staying home when they had family gatherings, not because I wasn't invited, technically I was, but because I didn't want to sit through another meal where I had to pretend I didn't hear what I heard. And then came the text. It was a group thread. Daniel, his parents, his sister, and me. His mum sent a message about an upcoming family weekend. It ended with, "We'll keep it just family this time." I stared at it for a long time before replying. Daniel said it was a mistake, that she didn't mean it like that. But I knew she did. I'd spent years giving. To him, to them. I'd helped them when they were struggling. I'd supported Daniel while he chased his dreams. I'd taken every hit she delivered and kept my mouth shut. But now the cracks were showing. And no one, not even Daniel, was stepping in to stop it. It was the beginning of something I didn't have words for yet, but I could feel it. I was being edged out, quietly, deliberately, and no one was going to admit it. It was a Wednesday. Daniel had worked a double. I remember because he called me on his break and asked if I could bring him a protein bar from the pantry, the one with the blue wrapper. He sounded tired, but not unusual for him. I told him I'd leave it by the front door so he could grab it when he got home. That was around 4:30. At 8:12 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. A nurse told me Daniel had collapsed in the ambulance bay. Stroke. They'd rushed him straight to the ICU. I didn't ask questions. I just grabbed my bag, locked the door, and drove. I don't even remember the red lights. By the time I got to the hospital, he was already in surgery. An ICU nurse met me at the front desk. She asked my name, checked her clipboard, then said, "He's being stabilized. You can wait in this room here. Someone will update you soon." I sat in that cold, too bright room alone. No clock, no news, just the steady beep of some machine down the hall, and the occasional sound of wheels rolling past. After maybe 40 minutes, a doctor came in and gave me a status update. They were doing everything they could. It didn't sound good, but it wasn't final. Then I heard the voices, loud ones, familiar ones. His parents. His mother was already upset when she walked in. "Where is he?" she demanded. The nurse pointed toward the OR wing and said something I couldn't hear. Then she saw me. She froze for a second, then said, "Why are you even here?" I stood up. "Because I'm his wife." She didn't blink. "You're not blood." I looked at the nurse, trying to explain. "I'm listed on his file. I brought him here." His mother turned to the nurse, sharp and controlled. "She doesn't make decisions. We're his family." The nurse hesitated. She looked confused, unsure of what to do. I reached into my bag, pulled out my ID, my insurance card, our marriage certificate. I had it scanned on my phone just in case. I held it out. His father said, quietly, "Let's not make this a scene." And that's when security came. 2 men. Polite, firm. One of them said, "Ma'am, we're going to have to ask you to wait in the public lobby." I said, "You don't understand. I'm not just some girlfriend. I'm his wife." The other one said, "I'm sorry, but you're not listed as next of kin. His mother is on file." I turned to the nurse. "I was just speaking to someone from the surgical team. They knew who I was." She avoided my eyes. "There's been a change in instructions." I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just picked up my bag and walked down the hallway. The public lobby was mostly empty. A couple of people asleep in chairs, one man pacing and talking on the phone. I found a spot near the vending machine and sat. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just stared at the out of order sign on the snack machine and tried to figure out how any of this was happening. At some point, someone must have updated them. I never found out exactly what time, but around 1:15 a.m., a nurse came into the lobby, found me, and said, "Mrs. Ramirez?" I stood. She paused. "I'm sorry. Daniel didn't make it." I asked if I could see him. She hesitated. "You'll need to ask the family." I nodded. I sat back down. An hour later, his parents walked past me, not saying a word. His mother held a tissue in one hand, a clipboard in the other. I looked at her. She looked at the elevator. They never invited me in. I stayed there until sunrise. Around 6:30, a janitor came by and asked if I needed anything. I asked if there was a quiet place I could sit for a few more minutes. She showed me a side room. I sat there alone, called no one. I didn't even tell my sister until later that evening. I couldn't get the words out. I just sent a text. "Daniel died last night. I wasn't allowed in." She called me instantly. I didn't answer. The hospital issued a formal report the next day. Stroke, due to a previously undiagnosed arterial condition. Sudden. Aggressive. He was 34. His parents made all the arrangements. I wasn't included in any planning. I asked if there'd be a memorial service. His mother said, "Family only." I asked if I could help with costs. She said, "That won't be necessary." The obituary listed his education, his work history, and his family. Parents, sister, grandparents. No mention of me. I called the paper, asked if they could correct it. They said they needed approval from the person who submitted it. I let it go. The funeral was held the following Saturday. I heard about it through a former colleague of his. He assumed I'd be attending. I told him I hadn't been invited. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I'm sorry. That's wrong." I didn't go. Instead, I went to the beach. Daniel had always said he wanted to retire near the water. I brought one of his old hoodies, the one with the faded logo from his college gym. I sat on a bench for hours, just holding it. At some point, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Please don't contact the family anymore. We're grieving." I stared at it for a long time. I hadn't said a word to any of them since that night. I deleted the message. There's a kind of pain that doesn't scream. It just sits with you. Quiet, cold, constant. I kept telling myself I'd find a way to process it all, but I didn't know then how much more would follow, or how deeply that night would change the course of everything that came next. I went back to work the following Monday. Not because I was ready, but because no one was going to give me a better reason not to. My inbox was full, my voicemail was full, and my refrigerator was empty. When people asked how I was doing, I said, "Fine." If they asked more than once, I stopped replying. A few co-workers knew about Daniel. One sent flowers to the office. Another dropped off a lasagna I never opened. Most people said nothing. The silence wasn't personal. It was just easier for everyone. I kept thinking I'd wake up one morning and feel something other than this heavy, muted sense of being outside my own life. But that didn't happen. I got up. I worked. I came home. I didn't cry much. Maybe 2 or 3 times. Mostly in the car. I didn't hear from his family at all. Not a text. Not a call. The last thing they ever sent me was that message telling me not to contact them. I thought about replying. Just once. Saying everything I wanted to say. But I didn't. About 2 weeks after the funeral, I got a call from Dr. Nayar, one of Daniel's old mentors. She asked if I wanted to meet for coffee. I said yes. She didn't say sorry or offer platitudes. She just sat down across from me and said, "I was at the service. I didn't see you." I said, "I wasn't invited." She stared at me for a long moment. Then she said, "That's not grief. That's control." I didn't know how to respond to that. She sipped her coffee and said, "I don't know everything, but I do know Daniel respected you. Everyone who worked with him knew how much he leaned on you. His mother might rewrite things, but we all saw it." It was the first kind thing anyone had said to me in weeks. We sat there for almost an hour. I didn't talk much. She did. About hospital politics, upcoming changes in the admin board, a few new private clinics being funded by city partnerships. Nothing dramatic. Just small openings. Possibilities. When we got up to leave, she said, "You should think about where you want to land next. You've got more options than you think." That night, I opened my laptop and looked through my financials. I hadn't touched our shared savings account since Daniel died. I didn't even know if I still had access. I did. I saw every deposit I'd made over the past 7 years, every rent payment I'd covered, every check I'd written to help his parents, tuition, medical bills, mortgage gaps, almost $40,000. None of it had been repaid. I didn't care about the money. That wasn't the part that hurt. What hit me hardest was how invisible it had all become, like those years just didn't exist. I scrolled through my photos, trying to find one, just one, where we were all together, smiling, like a family. There weren't many. A couple of holidays, a dinner after Daniel's graduation. His mother always looked away in group shots. His father never smiled with teeth. I remembered her toast at our wedding, the way she'd said, "Daniel always learns from his mistakes." Everyone had laughed politely. I had too. I shouldn't have. I started sleeping less. Not because I was anxious, just because I didn't see the point of going to bed. I'd fall asleep on the couch with spreadsheets open, wake up at 4 a.m. and keep working. My contracts were steady, but I wanted out. I didn't want to keep helping other people build clinics and systems that undervalued their staff. I didn't want to keep pretending I didn't notice the way women were sidelined in every single board meeting. I wanted to do something different. It started with one phone call to a colleague I trusted who worked in small practice management. I asked if she knew of any clinics looking to sell or partner. She did. 3, in fact. One was too risky. One was already in litigation. But the third was interesting. A small urgent care centre just outside city limits. Privately run, decent staff, poor infrastructure, losing money fast. The owner was retiring. I booked a meeting. When I walked into the clinic, it was like stepping back in time. Outdated forms, scattered equipment, clunky software. But the front desk staff were kind. The nurses knew their patients by name. There was something there worth saving. I left with a stack of files and a key to review the financials. Over the next week, I ran the numbers, cross-checked licensing records, and made a list of improvements. It wouldn't be easy. I'd have to invest most of my savings. But I could do it. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to clarity. I made the offer. It was accepted within 3 days. I signed the paperwork at a diner across the street from the clinic. The owner passed me a pen and said, "It's yours now. Don't let it swallow you." I nodded. The day after closing, I updated my work status online. Independent practice owner, healthcare operations consultant, building something new. No photos, no announcement, just that. A few people messaged congratulations. Dr. Naya sent a thumbs up emoji. Daniel's family didn't see it. Or if they did, they didn't say anything. I thought about sending them an email. Something short, not spiteful, just the facts. I didn't. They'd made it clear they wanted me gone. So I went. But not quietly. And not empty-handed. They'd taken everything they could from me. Time, energy, space to grieve, even the right to say goodbye. But what they hadn't taken, what they never thought to guard, was the foundation I'd built when no one was looking. And that foundation was mine now. To build on, to own, to protect. Without them. I sold the car first. I listed it online with a few well-lit photos and priced it to move. It was gone within 2 days. I took the bus to the clinic that week and didn't complain. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I just needed runway. Next, I gave notice on the apartment. It wasn't extravagant, but it was more space than I needed. More memories than I wanted. The landlord asked if everything was okay. I said yes, and left it at that. I packed most of my things into storage and rented a studio half the size, across town. No elevator, no parking spot, no natural light. But it was clean and quiet, and that was enough. Everything else went into the clinic. I changed the name. Quietly. No press release, no signage. Just a registered DBA and a new account at the bank. I hired a billing consultant to restructure the invoicing system. Hired 2 part-time front desk staff to replace the overwhelmed office manager. Moved records onto a cloud-based system. It wasn't glamorous work. I spent nights fixing broken links in the scheduling software, researching compliance updates, writing policies no one would ever read. But it gave me something to hold on to. Something real. The patients noticed, slowly. One woman came in and said, "This place feels different. Less anxious." Another told me it was the first time she'd ever gotten a call back about her lab results. We weren't making money yet, but we weren't losing it as fast. That was a win. I didn't tell many people. I wasn't building it for attention. I wasn't trying to prove anything. But word gets around. A month after we reopened, I got a text from Daniel's cousin. We hadn't spoken since the funeral. It said, "Just so you know, your name came up at dinner. Thought you should be aware." No context, no details. I replied, "Thanks." He sent another message a minute later. "His mom says you're using the family name to make money, says it's not respectful." I stared at it for a while, then typed, "Tell her I'm not using anyone's name. I've never needed hers." I deleted it before hitting send. Instead, I said nothing. A few days later, another message came. Different cousin. Same message, different wording. "She thinks you're exploiting Daniel's memory. Wants you to stop." I didn't answer that one either. The truth was, I hadn't mentioned Daniel publicly at all. No tribute page, no social posts, no press releases with his photo or name. But I did keep something. His dream. He used to talk about opening a community clinic someday. Something small, but serious, he'd say. Somewhere people feel like they matter. I remembered those words every time I sat down to write a job description. Every time I reviewed an invoice, every time I told a supplier no, we wouldn't be paying for decorative plants until we could guarantee same-day labs. This wasn't about them. It never had been. But the messages kept coming. Once, his sister posted something online, a passive comment about people clinging to grief for profit. Someone tagged me. I didn't respond. At the clinic, I kept my head down. I worked. I listened. I made space for every patient who walked in. We added 2 new providers, switched to a better EMR, partnered with a local lab for faster results. The clinic started turning a profit in month 4. Not much, but enough to breathe. That's when I started hearing from other women. A nurse practitioner from another city emailed to ask how I got started. A former classmate from Daniel's med school reached out to say she was proud of me, that she remembered how hard I'd worked behind the scenes. It helped. Not in a big, dramatic way, but in a steadying way. Then, one Friday, I came into the clinic and found an envelope on the front desk. No return address, no name. Inside was a single piece of paper, printed, unsigned. She needs to stop using our name. That was it. Typed. Generic font. I read it once, folded it in half, and placed it in the shred bin. That afternoon, I ordered new signage for the clinic. Not because of the note. I'd been planning to do it anyway. But I changed one thing. Under the clinic name, I added a small, discreet line in silver text, established in honor of a quiet man with big dreams. No name, no dates, no initials. Just that. If they saw it, they never mentioned it. And if they did mention it behind closed doors, it didn't matter. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't asking for their permission. I wasn't waiting for their approval. And I wasn't giving them anything more to take. I had nothing left to give them. But I had something to build. And I was building it now, without apology. I didn't plan on expanding. Not at first. The clinic was enough. Barely. I was still sleeping odd hours, still taking late-night calls from the billing team, still running to the supply store myself when we ran out of printer paper. I'd never worked so much for so little, but it was mine. That mattered more than I expected. 6 months in, we started to stabilize. Patient retention improved. One of the nurses told me people were driving in from 2 towns over. I asked why. She said, "They say we listen." I didn't correct her. I was too tired to. Around that time, I enrolled in a hospital administration course. Just nights, online. It wasn't required for anything I was doing, but I needed to learn the systems from the inside. I wanted to understand how the bigger players made decisions, how they hid waste, moved money, cut costs at the wrong ends. During the day, I negotiated service contracts, oversaw renovations, reviewed performance metrics. At night, I listened to lectures about insurance coding and regional health networks. I kept notes, asked questions, followed up. We landed a private investor through one of the consultants I'd worked with years ago. She visited the clinic, looked around, and said, "You're doing this with no marketing budget?" I said yes. She laughed. "You're either brilliant or exhausted." I said, "Both." We met 3 times before she made an offer. It wasn't huge, but it was enough to cover expansion. We opened a second location in a smaller suburb. That's when the calls started coming in. Other clinics asking if we'd consider merging. Most of them were struggling. Too small to compete, too old school to adapt. I listened to every pitch, took every meeting, said no to almost all of them. But one offer stood out. A mid-size practice, mostly family care, with solid staff and terrible systems. Their director was retiring. The team wanted to stay but didn't want to run it themselves. I made a counteroffer, lower than they expected, but fair. They took it. The paperwork was signed in under a month. The morning after we announced the merger internally, I got a call from a contact at the city's public health department. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year. She asked if I could meet the following week. I said yes. We met at a downtown building I hadn't been to since before Daniel died. She got to the point quickly. The city was preparing to close a hospital. Not the biggest one, but still. Too many violations, too few updates. Staff turnover had made things unstable. They needed a private buyer, someone who could take it on without gutting it. She slid a file across the table. I didn't have to open it. I already knew. It was the same hospital. The one where Daniel had died. The one where I'd been told to wait in the lobby while his family signed the forms. I looked down at the folder and asked, "How soon?" She said, 60 days. Maybe less. I nodded. I didn't ask who else they'd spoken to. I didn't need to. When I got back to the clinic, I sat in the break room and stared at the vending machine. Same type as the one from that night. Same little red sticker that said, "Exact change only." I called my lawyer, asked for a draft LOI by morning. I signed it later that week. Quietly. No press. No announcement. Just a clean agreement and a timeline. The first time I walked through the building as the new owner, I took a different entrance. Not the ER, not the lobby. I came in through the back, where staff used to clock in. The floors were the same. The walls hadn't been painted. The chairs in the waiting room still had that same uncomfortable slope. Nothing had changed, but everything had. When I passed the hallway leading to the ICU, I stopped. It was quiet. I could still see the spot where I'd stood, back against the wall, phone in hand, waiting for someone to call my name. They never had. I walked further down, past the nurse's station, into the room they'd once made me leave. It was empty now. Just a bed, a monitor, and a clipboard with no chart. I stood there for a while. No one asked me to leave. The transition took 4 months. We brought in new equipment, replaced outdated records, updated software. Staff were skeptical at first. Some left. Others stayed and adapted. I sat in on training sessions, talked to every department head, made rounds once a week without a clipboard, just to listen. We didn't plaster the building with new logos. I didn't change the name. The only update was the signage in the lobby. A clean white wall with 2 lines of text. The second line was mine. The first? The hospital's original name. Some people noticed. Most didn't. I wasn't looking for recognition. I was looking for function. We started seeing improvements in the second quarter. Better wait times. Fewer complaints. A nurse who had worked there for 20 years told me, "I've never seen this place so steady." I said, "Let's keep it that way." She smiled. Around that time, I received a message from Daniel's cousin, the same one who'd sent me that warning months earlier. He said, "Saw your name in the public records." So did she. I didn't have to ask who she was. He said, "Her blood pressure spiked. They took her in yesterday." I stared at the message for a while. Then I wrote, "Where?" He answered with one word. The name of the hospital. My hospital. I put the phone down. No reply. No follow-up. I didn't call the ER. I didn't alert the staff. I just sat still. It was going to happen eventually. And I wasn't going to interfere. Let her walk through the front doors. Let her pass the lobby wall. Let her see my name. Let her feel whatever it was she needed to feel. Because I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. 2 months after the acquisition, the hospital was running smoothly enough that I'd stopped checking in every day. I had a capable admin team, reliable leads in every department, and enough on my plate with the two smaller clinics we were still trying to stabilize. But I still showed up twice a week. I walked the floors, took notes, listened to staff, made quiet corrections when needed. Not because I had to, but because I knew what happened when no one paid attention. That morning was normal. I'd gotten there early. The elevator was slow, as usual. I grabbed a coffee from the break room, nodded to a few nurses, and settled in for a department budget meeting. Then someone knocked on the glass. It was Marcus, one of the ICU nurses. We'd only worked together a few months, but I trusted him. He stepped inside, lowered his voice, and said, "We have a new admit, stroke protocol. But there's something you might want to know." I put down my pen. He continued, "Patient's name is Evelyn Farrow." I didn't react at first, just blinked once. Then I asked, "Room?" He told me. I stood up. I didn't rush. I didn't need to. She was already checked in, stabilized, and resting. I reviewed the intake notes quietly. Her blood pressure had spiked at home. Numbness, confusion, slurred speech. Her daughter had called the ambulance. I hadn't seen her in nearly a year. Not in person. Not since the night they walked past me in the hospital lobby without saying a word. I walked down the hall. Slowly. When I stepped into the ICU corridor, I didn't go straight in. I paused near the nurse's station, looked toward the wall that faced every visitor before they entered. It had gone up 2 weeks earlier. A clean, brushed metal plaque with 2 lines of text. D. Farrow Memorial Group. CEO, L. Ramirez. I hadn't chosen the placement, but I hadn't objected either. Her room was quiet. A soft beep from the monitor. Dim light. She was propped up slightly, eyes closed, face pale. I stepped inside. She didn't recognize me at first. I stood near the foot of the bed, reading her chart, watching her breathing pattern. Then her eyes opened. She blinked a few times, looked around, looked at me. Her forehead wrinkled, like she was trying to place me. Then her gaze shifted past me, out into the hallway. I turned slightly, just enough for her to see the plaque through the open door. Her eyes followed it, read it, then came back to me. She stared. "You?" Her voice was barely audible. I nodded once. She blinked again. No emotion at first, just confusion, then something colder, recognition. She tried to say something else but couldn't. Her hand trembled against the blanket. I didn't move. She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, her voice cracked. "Will you stay?" I didn't answer. I checked her IV line, looked at her oxygen saturation, flipped the chart back to the nurse's notes. I said nothing. Then I walked out. But I didn't leave the floor. I stayed nearby, spoke to her nurse, made sure every instruction was followed, every scan double-checked. I upgraded her room to private, requested a neurology consult from one of our best specialists. She would get the highest standard of care we offered, not because she deserved it, but because it was my hospital now, and that meant doing things right. That night, I told no one. Not my staff, not my friends, not the investors. The next day, I checked on her status remotely. No complications. Speech returning. Appetite weak, but improving. She stayed for 6 days. I passed her room twice. Each time, I kept walking. She didn't ask again. Her discharge summary included a note. Patient inquired about ownership, appeared emotionally affected. That was all. I never spoke to her directly. But on the morning she was discharged, I found something in my office mailbox. No return address, no envelope, just a folded sheet of paper. One line, written in uneven handwriting. I didn't know what I was doing that night. No name, no apology. I didn't keep it. I shredded it without reading it again. Some things don't need closure. They just need distance. In the weeks that followed, I thought about whether I'd made the right decision, letting her stay, ensuring she was cared for, refusing to engage. There wasn't a dramatic confrontation, no last-minute confession or scene in the hallway, just a woman realizing, for the first time, that I wasn't the one who had been erased, and she wasn't the one holding the pen anymore. She walked out of my hospital on a Tuesday morning. Her daughter pushed the wheelchair. I watched from the administrative office window, far enough that she couldn't see me. She paused for a second at the entrance, looked up at the building. Then she kept going. She hasn't been back. And I haven't looked for her. Whatever she wanted, regret, acknowledgement, maybe even forgiveness, I didn't owe it. She'd made her choices, and I had made mine. I didn't need her to understand them. I just needed to keep walking forward, without waiting for anyone to catch up. It's been a year. We hit our performance targets 2 quarters in a row. Our patient satisfaction metrics are the best in the district. The ICU turnover rate has dropped by half. We're not perfect. We never will be. But people are staying longer. Patients are getting answers faster. Staff meetings don't feel like interrogations anymore. The board asked me if I wanted to apply for a state-level grant. It would mean publicity, press releases, maybe even a few interviews. I told them I'd think about it. I still wear the same badge. It just says, L. Ramirez. No titles. Most patients don't know who I am. That's by design. Every so often, someone will notice the plaque in the lobby, the one with Daniel's name. They'll ask, was he your father? Or your brother? I always say the same thing. He was a good doctor. That part's true. He was smart. He listened. He cared. Not just about diagnoses, but about people. The last few years of his life were complicated. Not everything between us was perfect. But the part where he tried to do good, that part deserved to be remembered. So I remembered it. I don't hear from his family anymore. Not since the hospital stay. No calls. No letters. No online noise. Just silence. It used to bother me, how easy it was for them to cut me out. How publicly they erased me. How much effort they put into making me feel temporary. Now I don't think about them much at all. They're not part of the work I do, not part of the systems I run, or the programs we're building, or the late-night calls I still sometimes take when a department lead gets stuck. They're not part of the team that stayed through hard months, or the new hires who walk into our staff orientation and say, "This place just feels different." They're not part of the patients who cry in gratitude because someone finally took their pain seriously. They're not part of the shift changes, the supply chain headaches, the policy rewrites. They're not part of this anymore. And that's the point. When I pass the ICU now, I don't feel bitterness. I just remember. Not every day, but sometimes. Usually when the hallway is quiet and the light hits just right. I remember how it felt to be told I didn't belong. How it felt to sit in the lobby while the person I loved was dying just down the hall. How it felt to hand over proof of my life and be told it didn't count. And then I remember something else. I remember that this place isn't like that anymore. I remember that no one else waits in that lobby without updates. That partners, spouses, chosen family, anyone who matters to the patient, gets a seat, gets a voice. I remember the nurse who told me last month, "We don't do locked doors unless there's a reason. Everyone's someone to someone." And I remember Daniel saying, once, early in our marriage, "I just want to be the kind of doctor I'd trust with my own mum." He didn't say that often, but he meant it. So that's what we built. A place where people are seen. A place where the past doesn't get to decide the future. A place where no one gets thrown out. That was the legacy I chose. Not revenge. Not payback. Just something better. Not for them. For everyone else. And for me, because in the end, I didn't need an apology. I didn't need them to understand. I just needed a place that worked the way it should have all along. And now I have it. It's not loud. It's not flashy. It's not something most people will ever write about. But it matters. And it's mine. Thanks for sticking with me through the end. Have you ever been shut out by people you once bent over backward for? Did you stay silent, or did you find your own way forward? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. And if you've ever had to rebuild your life after being pushed aside, hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories about taking your power back, one decision at a time. Until next time, take care of yourself first.